The bustling halls of StarTech Industries buzzed with activity as employees rushed through their morning routines. Among the sea of crisp suits and clicking heels, an elderly man in a gray custodial uniform quietly pushed his cleaning cart, his weathered hands gripping the handle with practiced ease. This was Robert Thompson, a 73-year-old janitor who had become a familiar presence in the building over the past 5 years. Marcus Chen, the 42-year-old CEO of StarTech Industries, had always prided himself on running one of the most successful tech companies in the city. On this particular Monday morning, he was reviewing quarterly reports in his corner office when something unusual caught his attention. Through his glass walls, he noticed Robert diligently cleaning the same area he had seen him maintaining late the previous night. Frowning, Marcus checked the employee logs on his computer. His suspicions were confirmed. Robert had indeed worked a double shift, ending his previous day's work at 11 p.m. and returning early at 6 a.m. This wasn't a one-time occurrence. The pattern repeated throughout the past month's records. Despite his age and demanding schedule, Robert never showed signs of fatigue. His warm smile remained constant as he greeted everyone, from executives to interns, with the same genuine friendliness. The old man's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, revealing deep laugh lines that spoke of a life filled with both joy and hardship. Marcus found himself increasingly intrigued by this elderly employee. During his afternoon coffee break, he casually approached Sarah Martinez, the HR manager, to inquire about Robert's file. "Robert? Oh, he's one of our most reliable employees," Sarah shared, pulling up his records. "He's never missed a day of work in 5 years, and he's always volunteering for extra shifts. The cleaning supervisor says he's the first to arrive and the last to leave. But why would someone his age work such long hours?" Marcus wondered aloud, his coffee forgotten on Sarah's desk. "He's never complained or asked for help," Sarah replied, her expression thoughtful, "though I've noticed he always seems interested in knowing when we have company events with catered food." This detail struck Marcus as odd. StarTech offered competitive wages, even to custodial staff. Robert's double shifts alone should have provided him with a comfortable living. Something didn't add up. Later that afternoon, Marcus observed Robert from his office. The elderly janitor was methodically cleaning the windows, his movements careful and precise. There was a dignity in the way he carried himself, a quiet pride that seemed at odds with his circumstances. As the day progressed, Marcus noticed something peculiar. During lunch hour, when most employees headed to the cafeteria or nearby restaurants, Robert lingered near the cafeteria entrance. After most people had finished their meals, he would quietly approach the cafeteria staff, engaging in brief conversations that ended with him carefully packaging leftover food in clean containers he brought from home. The CEO's concern grew. Was one of his employees struggling so much that he had to rely on leftover food? The thought bothered Marcus deeply. He had always believed in taking care of his employees, and the idea that someone might be suffering in silence didn't sit well with him. That evening, as the office began to empty, Marcus made a decision. Instead of heading home at his usual time, he stayed late, pretending to work while keeping an eye on Robert through his office windows. The elderly janitor continued his routine, moving from floor to floor with his cleaning cart, now adding more food containers from the evening's catered executive meeting. At 11 p.m., Robert finally clocked out. Marcus watched as he carefully arranged his collected food containers in a large bag, changed out of his uniform in the employee locker room, and headed toward the bus stop outside the building. Without much thought, Marcus grabbed his car keys, deciding to follow Robert to understand the full story. As he walked to his car, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Robert Thompson than met the eye. The elderly janitor's mysterious behavior, his unfailing work ethic, and his interest in leftover food had created a puzzle that Marcus felt compelled to solve. Little did he know, following Robert that night would lead him to a discovery that would change not only his perspective, but the entire culture of his company. The night air was crisp as Marcus followed Robert's bus in his black Tesla, maintaining a careful distance. The elderly janitor sat quietly by the window, his bag of food containers held protectively on his lap. The bus wound through the city's busy streets, moving from the affluent business district into a more modest neighborhood. After a 40-minute ride, Robert pulled the stop cord and descended from the bus. Marcus parked his car discreetly and watched as the old man walked with purpose, his steps steady despite the long day of work. The neighborhood, while not wealthy, was clean and well maintained, with small houses lining the streets. To Marcus's surprise, Robert didn't enter any of the houses. Instead, he continued walking for several more blocks, passing a small park and a closed convenience store. The CEO began to feel increasingly uncomfortable about following his employee, but his concern and curiosity outweighed his hesitation. The street lights cast long shadows as Robert finally stopped in front of a large brick building. A worn sign identified it as the Veterans Community Center. Marcus watched from behind a parked car as Robert approached the back entrance, where a middle-aged woman was waiting. "Mr. Thompson." We were starting to worry. The woman called out softly. "Some of our regulars are still waiting." "Sorry for the delay, Maria," Robert replied, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet night. The executive meeting ran late, but they had some excellent catering. Premium sandwiches and fruit platters today. Marcus crept closer, hiding behind some bushes near the building's corner. Through a window, he could see into what appeared to be a makeshift dining area. Several people, mostly older men and a few women, sat at long tables. Some wore worn military jackets, while others were dressed in clean, but obviously well-used clothing. Robert entered the room, and the atmosphere immediately brightened. "Evening, everyone," he called out cheerfully, setting his bag on a side table. "Today's menu is special." As he watched, Marcus saw Robert carefully unpack the food containers. With practiced efficiency, he arranged the contents on plates, making sure each portion was equal and presentable. The woman named Maria helped him serve the waiting group. "Robert, you're an angel," an elderly veteran said, accepting a plate. "Don't know what we'd do without you." "Now, James, I'm just doing what needs to be done," Robert responded humbly. "Besides, you do the same for me. We take care of our own, right?" Marcus stood transfixed as he observed the scene unfolding before him. Robert moved among the tables, not just serving food but stopping to chat with each person, placing a gentle hand on a shoulder here, sharing a laugh there. It was clear he knew everyone by name and their stories. "How's the job search going, Mike?" Robert asked a younger veteran. "Got an interview tomorrow, Mr. T," the man replied. "Thanks for helping with my resume." "Just remember what we practiced," Robert encouraged. "You got this." As the CEO watched, more pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. The double shifts, the careful collection of leftover food, the long bus ride. It wasn't about poverty or desperation. It was about service and compassion. Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket, displaying his wife's concerned message about his late return, but he couldn't leave yet. He needed to understand more. Through the window, he could see Robert sitting down with a small group after everyone had been served. They were looking at papers spread on the table, what appeared to be job applications and housing forms. Even after a 16-hour workday, the elderly janitor was still giving his time and energy to others. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical force. Here was a man who worked double shifts not because he needed the money, but because his position gave him access to resources he could share with others. The leftover food wasn't for himself. It was for these veterans who had served their country and now needed help themselves. As Marcus finally turned to leave, his mind was already racing with ideas. He had been wrong in his assumptions, but this mistake had led him to discover something extraordinary. Tomorrow would bring changes, but for now, he left Robert to his quiet mission, serving those who had served, one meal at a time. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the office earlier than usual, his mind still processing what he had witnessed the night before. He sat at his desk, opening his laptop to begin a deeper investigation into Robert Thompson's background. What he discovered left him even more amazed. Robert's employee file revealed only basic information, but a broader internet search unveiled a remarkable history. News articles from decades ago showed a younger Robert in military uniform, receiving a Silver Star for valor in Vietnam. The citation described how he had risked his life to save 3 fellow soldiers during an intense firefight. As Marcus dug deeper, he found more recent local newspaper clippings. 5 years ago, Robert's wife, Eleanor, had passed away after a long battle with cancer. The couple had been married for 45 years. The obituary mentioned their extensive volunteer work with veterans organizations and how Eleanor had been instrumental in establishing the very community center where Marcus had followed Robert the previous night. Around 10 a.m., Marcus watched through his office window as Robert went about his usual cleaning duties. The elderly janitor moved with the same careful precision as always, but now Marcus noticed other details he had missed before. How Robert would pause to help someone who had dropped papers, or the way he made sure to clean the break room just before lunch when it would be most appreciated. During the lunch hour, Marcus decided to visit the cafeteria himself. He observed as Robert had his usual brief conversation with the cafeteria staff. Today's conversation was different, though. The head chef seemed to be apologetically explaining something to Robert, who nodded understanding but looked disappointed. Curious, Marcus approached the chef after Robert had left. "Is everything okay with Mr. Thompson?" he asked casually. The chef sighed. "Yeah, just had to tell them we won't have as many leftovers today. We're trying to reduce food waste, you see. He always makes sure nothing goes to waste, takes the leftovers home. Never seen someone so careful about food." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. The company's recent sustainability initiative, while well-intentioned, was unknowingly affecting Robert's mission to help the veterans. The irony wasn't lost on him. Later that afternoon, Marcus received a visit from Sarah from HR. "Mr. Chen, I wanted to bring something to your attention," she began, placing a folder on his desk. "It's about Robert Thompson. He's reached retirement age, and company policy requires we discuss transition plans with employees in his situation." Marcus felt a sudden concern. The thought of Robert being forced to retire hadn't occurred to him. "What does the policy say exactly?" he asked, opening the folder. "Well, technically, we should have had this conversation with him last year," Sarah explained. "He's well past the standard retirement age. We've been flexible because he's such a reliable employee, but corporate is asking questions." As they discussed the policy, Marcus watched Robert through the office window. The elderly janitor was helping a young intern who had spilled coffee, quickly cleaning the mess while putting the embarrassed young man at ease with what appeared to be a gentle joke. "Let's hold off on any retirement discussions for now," Marcus decided. "I have some ideas I need to explore first." After Sarah left, Marcus spent the rest of the afternoon making phone calls and doing research. He contacted the Veterans Community Center, speaking with Maria, the woman he had seen the previous night. She was initially hesitant to discuss Robert, but opened up when Marcus explained his position and intentions. "Mr. Thompson is a godsend," Maria told him. "He doesn't just bring food. He mentors the younger vets, helps with job applications, even teaches basic computer skills. Did you know he convinced 3 local businesses to implement veteran hiring programs?" By the end of the day, Marcus had filled several pages with notes and ideas. As he watched Robert prepare to leave for his evening shift, the CEO felt a deep respect for this humble man who had created such a significant impact without anyone noticing. What had started as concern about an elderly employee's welfare had led Marcus to discover a hidden network of compassion and support, operating quietly within the shadows of his corporate world. Now, he knew it was his turn to act, but first, he needed to understand the full scope of Robert's mission. The next evening, Marcus decided to make an official visit to the Veterans Community Center. He timed his arrival just before Robert's usual appearance, walking through the front door this time instead of hiding in the shadows. The building's interior was modest but welcoming, with patriotic posters and military unit flags decorating the walls. Maria, who was organizing some paperwork at the front desk, looked up in surprise at the sight of the well-dressed CEO. "Mr. Chen, we weren't expecting you so early," she said, standing to greet him. "Robert usually doesn't arrive for another hour." "Actually, I'd like to see how things operate before he arrives," Marcus explained. "Would you mind showing me around?" Maria led him through the facility, explaining their various programs. The main room, where he had seen people eating the night before, served multiple purposes. During the day, it hosted job training workshops and support group meetings. One corner had 3 old computers where veterans could work on resumes or search for jobs. "Most of our equipment is donated," Maria explained, gesturing to the outdated machines. "We make do with what we have." As they toured the building, veterans began arriving for the evening meal program. Marcus noticed how some seemed hesitant, almost embarrassed to be there, while others greeted each other with the easy familiarity of longtime friends. "Mr. Thompson changed everything when he started coming here," Maria shared, her voice soft with admiration. "Before, we could only offer meals twice a week. Now, With his food collection program, we serve dinner every night. But it's more than just food. He gives them hope. Just then, a young veteran in his early 30s entered the room, carrying a stack of papers. His face lit up when he saw Maria. "I got the job," he announced proudly, waving what appeared to be employment papers. Mr. T's mock interviews really helped. "When can I tell them?" "Mike, this is Mr. Chen," Maria introduced. "He's actually Robert's employer." Recognition flashed across Mike's face. "From StarTech. Mr. T talks about the company all the time. Says it's the best job he's ever had because it lets him help us." Before Marcus could respond, more veterans began filing in. He observed as they naturally formed small groups, some helping to set up tables while others assisted those who had difficulty moving. The sense of community was palpable. At precisely 7 o'clock, Robert arrived through the back door, carrying his usual bags of food containers. He stopped short when he saw Marcus, surprise briefly crossing his face before his usual warm smile returned. "Mr. Chen," he said, straightening his shoulders, "I suppose I owe you an explanation." "No, Robert," Marcus replied quickly. "I owe you an apology for following you the other night. But now that I'm here officially, I'd like to help." Robert's eyes widened slightly, but before he could respond, Mike rushed over to share his good news. The elderly janitor's face beamed with genuine joy as he listened to the young veteran's success story. "See? What did I tell you?" Robert said, clasping Mike's shoulder. "You just needed to believe in yourself." Marcus watched as Robert seamlessly moved into his evening routine, organizing the food distribution while simultaneously checking in with various veterans about their progress with job searches, housing applications, or personal challenges. It was like watching a master conductor lead an orchestra, every interaction purposeful and caring. What struck Marcus most was how Robert's presence seemed to bring dignity to the entire process. He didn't just serve food. He created an environment where these veterans could feel respected and valued. As the evening progressed, Marcus sat quietly in a corner, taking in the scene. He watched as Robert helped an elderly veteran navigate a job application website on one of the old computers, the screen flickering as they slowly filled out the forms. He observed as Robert discreetly slipped a bus pass to a veteran who had walked 3 miles to get there. By the end of the evening, Marcus had filled several pages in his notebook. He had come to the center thinking he would find a simple food distribution program. Instead, he had discovered a comprehensive support system built largely through the dedication of his elderly janitor. Walking to his car later, Marcus knew that tomorrow would bring big changes to StarTech Industries. Robert Thompson had unknowingly taught him a valuable lesson about true corporate responsibility and human dignity. The following morning, Marcus called an emergency meeting with his executive team. As his top managers filed into the conference room, he noticed them exchanging curious glances. It was unusual for the CEO to schedule such an early meeting without prior notice. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus began, standing at the head of the table. "Last night, I discovered something extraordinary happening right under our noses, and it's going to change how we operate as a company." He proceeded to tell them about Robert, carefully explaining the elderly janitor's mission while projecting photos he had taken at the Veterans Community Center on the screen behind him. The images showed the outdated computers, the makeshift dining area, and veterans helping each other with various tasks. "What most impressed me," Marcus continued, "was learning about Robert's background. After diving deeper into his history, I discovered he's not just a Vietnam veteran with a silver star, he's also a former business owner." The revelation caused several executives to lean forward in their chairs. Marcus clicked to the next slide, showing a newspaper clipping from 15 years ago. It featured a younger Robert standing proudly in front of a small but successful manufacturing company. Robert owned Thompson Manufacturing for 20 years, Marcus explained. He employed over 50 people, many of them veterans. When his wife got sick, he sold the company to pay for her medical treatments. After she passed, instead of retiring, he chose to work as a janitor, specifically because it would allow him to help other veterans. Sarah from HR spoke up, but why didn't he mention any of this in his job application? "Because Robert Thompson doesn't believe in trading on past accomplishments," Marcus replied. "He believes in actions, not words. While we've been discussing corporate social responsibility in this very room, he's been quietly showing us what it truly means." The CEO then shared some statistics he had gathered. Over the past 5 years, Robert had helped 37 veterans find full-time employment, assisted 12 in securing housing, and provided thousands of meals through his food collection program. He had done all this while working double shifts and never missing a day of work. Here's the most humbling part, Marcus continued, his voice growing serious. Robert donates half his salary to buy supplies for the community center. He lives in a small one-bedroom apartment, so he can use his pension to help others. When I asked Maria about this, she told me he says he's just doing what Eleanor would have wanted. The room fell silent as the executives processed this information. Marcus clicked to his final slide, which outlined his proposed changes to company policy. Starting today, we're going to formalize and expand Robert's food collection program. Our cafeteria will partner directly with the Veterans Community Center. We're also establishing a corporate volunteer program with paid time off for employees who want to help at the center. He paused, looking around the room. That's just the beginning. I want to create a foundation, funded by StarTech, specifically focused on veteran support. And I want Robert Thompson to help design it. As the meeting continued, the executives began contributing their own ideas. The marketing team suggested creating a mentorship program pairing veterans with StarTech employees. The IT department offered to upgrade the community center's computer lab. Human Resources proposed implementing a company-wide veteran hiring initiative. Meanwhile, unaware of the meeting taking place, Robert was going about his morning routine. As he cleaned the windows of the conference room from the outside, he could see the executives engaged in serious discussion, occasionally glancing in his direction. He simply smiled and continued his work, not realizing he was the subject of their conversation. By the time the meeting ended 2 hours later, StarTech Industries had committed to a complete overhaul of its community outreach programs. But Marcus knew the next step would be the most important, and potentially the most challenging, convincing the humble janitor to step into a more prominent role. As he watched Robert through his office window, Marcus realized that the elderly veteran had given them more than just an opportunity to help others. He had shown them that true leadership isn't about titles or corner offices. It's about seeing a need and quietly working to fill it, one person at a time. Later that afternoon, Marcus invited Robert to his office. The elderly janitor entered hesitantly, still wearing his gray uniform, his hands folded respectfully in front of him. "Please, sit down, Robert," Marcus said warmly, gesturing to the comfortable chair across from his desk. "There's something important I'd like to discuss with you." Robert sat down carefully, his usually confident demeanor slightly nervous. "Mr. Chen, if this is about taking the leftover food, I can explain." "Actually," Marcus interrupted gently, "this is about offering you a new position at StarTech Industries." He proceeded to outline the company's plans for the new Veteran Support Foundation. As he spoke, Robert's expression shifted from concern to surprise, then to something approaching disbelief. "We want you to be the executive director of the StarTech Veterans Foundation," Marcus explained. "Your experience as a business owner, combined with your work at the community center, makes you uniquely qualified." Robert shook his head slowly. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate the offer, but I'm just a janitor. My business days are long behind me." "Are they?" Marcus pressed, pulling out a folder, "because I spoke with Mike Anderson yesterday, the young veteran who just got hired at Palmer Technologies. He told me how you rewrote his resume, coached him through interviews, and even helped him get a suit from the donation center." Robert shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "That's just basic mentoring." "Then there's James Cooper," Marcus continued, "who told me how you helped him develop a business plan for his food truck. And Maria showed me the spreadsheet system you created to track the center's resources and needs. That's not just mentoring, Robert. That's business acumen." The elderly janitor remained silent, his weathered hands clasped tightly in his lap. "You've been quietly running a comprehensive veteran support program while working double shifts as a janitor," Marcus said softly. "Imagine what you could accomplish with the full resources of StarTech behind you." For the first time since Marcus had known him, Robert appeared genuinely emotional. "Eleanor and I always dreamed of doing something like this," he said quietly. "After I lost the business and then her, well, I just tried to help in whatever way I could." Marcus leaned forward. "The foundation will have an initial endowment of $5 million. We're renovating the entire third floor of our east building to house it. The computer lab at the community center will be upgraded, and we're establishing a network of corporate partners for job placement. Robert listened intently as Marcus outlined more details. A full-time staff of 10 people, a comprehensive veterans support program, and partnerships with local businesses and healthcare providers. But, Marcus added, we need someone who understands both the corporate world and the veteran community. Someone who has earned the trust of those we want to help. Someone like you, Robert. The elderly janitor was quiet for a long moment, looking out the office window at the city skyline. Finally, he turned back to Marcus. Eleanor would have loved this, he said softly, but I have one condition. Name it, Marcus replied. I want to keep cleaning the building's first floor myself, Robert said firmly. Just the morning shift. It keeps me grounded, reminds me where I started. And I get to know the new employees, see who might need help. Marcus smiled, extending his hand. Deal. Though I must warn you, your salary will be significantly higher than what you're making now. Robert shook his hand, then added with a twinkle in his eye, that just means I can help more veterans, doesn't it? As Robert left the office, walking perhaps a bit straighter than when he entered, Marcus watched him return to his cleaning cart. The elderly janitor immediately helped a young intern who had spilled coffee, speaking to her with his usual kindness. Marcus realized that while they were giving Robert a new title and resources, he had already been leading and teaching all along. The only difference was that now, his impact would extend far beyond the walls of StarTech Industries. The CEO smiled as he remembered something his father once told him. True leadership isn't given or taken, it's earned through service to others. Robert Thompson had spent his entire life proving that principle, one act of kindness at a time. The transformation of StarTech Industries over the next 3 months was remarkable. Under Robert's guidance, the new Veterans Foundation took shape with an efficiency that impressed even the most skeptical executives. The third-floor renovation was completed ahead of schedule, creating a warm and welcoming space that balanced professional atmosphere with comfortable accessibility. Robert insisted on having a coffee station near the entrance, staffed by veteran volunteers, creating an immediate sense of community for visitors. One morning, as Marcus walked through the Foundation's new offices, he found Robert teaching a computer skills class to a group of veterans. The elderly man moved with enthusiasm between the new workstations, his former janitor's uniform replaced by casual business attire, though he still wore his worn work boots. A personal reminder, he said, of where his journey began. The key to a good resume, Robert was explaining to his attentive audience, is not just listing what you did in the service, but translating those skills into civilian terms. Leadership, logistics, problem-solving, these are valuable in any workplace. The success stories began accumulating quickly. Within the first month, 15 veterans had found full-time employment through the Foundation's placement program. The community center, now equipped with modern computers and reliable internet, became a hub for job training and support services. But it was the smaller, personal touches that truly set the Foundation apart. Robert insisted on maintaining his early morning cleaning shift, using this time to identify employees who might be struggling or having problems at home. More than once, Marcus arrived at work to find Robert counseling the young employee in the break room, offering the same wisdom and support he gave to his veterans. The Foundation's impact extended beyond just employment assistance. Robert established a mentorship program pairing successful veterans with those still finding their way. He created support groups for families, understanding that transition affected not just the veterans but their loved ones as well. One particularly meaningful project was the Eleanor Thompson Memorial Fund, named after Robert's late wife. This emergency assistance program helped veterans with immediate needs, rent payments, car repairs, medical bills, while they worked toward long-term stability. Eleanor always said that sometimes people just need a bridge to get from where they are to where they're going, Robert explained to Marcus during a progress review. We're building those bridges now. The local business community took notice. Inspired by StarTech's initiative, other companies began reaching out, wanting to participate in the veteran hiring program. Robert's experience as a former business owner proved invaluable as he helped these companies develop veteran-friendly hiring practices. Even the StarTech cafeteria program expanded. What started as Robert's simple collection of leftover food grew into a comprehensive meal service program, with local restaurants and catering companies joining the effort to support the community center's dining program. One day, while reviewing the Foundation's quarterly report, Marcus received an unexpected visit from Mike, the young veteran who had gotten his first job through Robert's help. "I wanted you to see this," Mike said, placing a small stack of papers on Marcus's desk. They were job applications, but this time, Mike was the one doing the hiring for his new department at Palmer Technologies. "Mr. T helped me get my start," Mike explained proudly. "Now, I'm in a position to do the same for others." That's what he taught us. Success isn't just about getting ahead yourself, it's about bringing others along with you. The Foundation's influence began spreading beyond the local community. Other companies started reaching out, wanting to replicate the program in their cities. Robert found himself giving presentations to corporate boards, sharing his vision of how businesses could better support veterans. Through it all, Robert maintained his humble approach. Every morning, he still arrived before dawn to clean the first floor, saying it helped him think and plan his day. Employees arriving early would often find him mopping the lobby, happy to chat about their lives or concerns. When asked about the Foundation's success, Robert always deflected praise to his team and the veterans themselves. "I'm just the janitor who got lucky," he would say with a smile. "These men and women are the real heroes. I'm just helping them find their way home." As Marcus watched the Foundation flourish under Robert's leadership, he realized that sometimes the greatest leaders are found in the most unexpected places. Robert Thompson had gone from cleaning offices to changing lives, proving that true impact often starts with simple acts of kindness. 1 year after the Foundation's launch, StarTech Industries hosted a special evening celebration to commemorate its achievements. The company's grand lobby had been transformed for the occasion, with military flags displayed alongside corporate banners, symbolizing the bridge that had been built between these two worlds. Robert, still wearing his work boots with his suit, stood quietly at the back of the room, watching as hundreds of guests filled the space. Veterans he had helped, corporate partners, community leaders, and StarTech employees all mingled together, creating a tapestry of success stories. Marcus took the podium, clearing his throat to address the gathered crowd. "1 year ago, I followed our janitor after work because I was concerned about him," he began, drawing gentle laughter from the audience. That decision led to the discovery of an extraordinary mission, which has now helped over 300 veterans find employment, provided thousands of meals, and created a support network that continues to grow. As Marcus spoke, Robert noticed several familiar faces in the crowd. There was Mike, now a department manager, sitting with 2 veterans he had recently hired. James Cooper had parked his successful food truck outside the building, providing catering for the event. Maria from the community center was there with her entire staff, all wearing new uniforms provided by the Foundation. The statistics Marcus shared were impressive: 312 veterans placed in full-time jobs, 89 families assisted with housing, 150 business partnerships established, and over $2 million in emergency assistance provided through the Eleanor Thompson Memorial Fund. But it was the personal stories that truly captured the Foundation's impact. One by one, veterans stood to share how their lives had changed. They spoke of renewed hope, restored dignity, and the simple kindness of a man who believed in them when they had stopped believing in themselves. As the testimonials continued, Robert felt a familiar presence beside him. Marcus had left the podium and joined him at the back of the room. "You still haven't taken a proper office upstairs," Marcus noted quietly. Robert smiled. "The cleaning closet on the first floor suits me just fine for paperwork. Besides, you can't help people from behind a desk." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a surprising guest, the mayor, who had come to present Robert with a key to the city. As Robert reluctantly made his way to the front of the room, the crowd parted, applauding the man who had touched so many lives. "This recognition is wonderful," Robert said when he reached the podium, "but it's not about me. It's about what happens when we see each other's potential instead of our problems. When we offer help instead of judgment. When we remember that everyone deserves a second chance." He paused, touching the worn work boots that had become his trademark. "I keep wearing these boots to remind myself and others that no job is too small when you're serving others. Every morning, I still clean the first floor of this building, not because I have to, but because it keeps me connected to where this journey began." The celebration continued into the evening, but the most powerful moment came near the end. A group of veterans, led by Mike, presented Robert with a shadow box containing his wife Eleanor's favorite photograph. In it, she stood in front of their old manufacturing company, smiling proudly. Below the photo, they had inscribed her words, "Sometimes people just need a bridge." As the event wound down, Robert took his familiar walk through the building, checking doors and turning off lights. Habits from his janitor days that he would never abandon. In the lobby, he paused to straighten a flag that had become slightly crooked. Marcus, preparing to leave, found him there. "You know," the CEO said, "when I followed you that night, I thought I was going to save you. Instead, you ended up saving all of us in ways we didn't even know we needed." Robert smiled, running his hand along his cleaning cart that still stood in its usual corner. "We're all just walking each other home, Mr. Chen. Some of us just take a longer route to get there." As they left the building together, the night was clear and full of stars. The foundation sign glowed softly above them, a beacon of hope in the city skyline. Robert Thompson, the janitor who became a leader, had shown that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with simply noticing what needs to be done and having the courage to do it.